The ultimate tragedy is not the oppression and the cruelty by the bad people, but the silence over that by the good people. So says Martin Luther King. May God bless us and protect us from evil. So says us. And now here's Reverend Sue.
Got joy in my soul. God is in control. I got Satan on my trail, but I'm singing all is well. He's attacking every day, but I'm watching while I pray. No matter the attack, I won't turn back, 'cause this means war.
Good evening, and we are excited to have actually a friend of Sunday Evening with Reverend Sue, Judge Fair Aura Rose Teray. And we talk about Women History Month. She is history, Women History Month. And also, we're going to be talking about some very important information that we have in reference to state voting bills. And we think that she's probably one of the most qualified people I know to explain to us what's really happening right here as we speak in this country. She is a Harvard graduate, civil rights activist, and litigation attorney who has worked on some of the highest profile civil rights cases to come before courts. She's a civil rights activist and lawyer. She was the first African American female judge in Alabama. She's a graduate of Johnson C. Smith University and Harvard Law School, the founder of National Voting Rights Museum. She coordinates the annual Bridge Crossing Jubilee to mark the anniversary of Bloody Sunday, which took place last Sunday. And she is married to politician Hank Sanders. So thank you so much, Attorney Teray, for taking the time again to be with us. I know you have not had rest even since last Sunday, where y'all actually did an outstanding commemoration of Bloody Sunday, and we thank God for you for continue to provide us with the necessary information that we need, not only in our community but throughout this country. So we thank you. Today we want to get more information on what's happening in reference to the state voting bills, and what should we do, how should we do it, and just explain to us the seriousness of this whole situation that is happening with 43 states right now. So, and I believe that these bills are restrictive and expansive bills as of February the 19th, 2021, where lawmakers have carried over, pre-filed, or introduced 253 bills with provision that restrict voting access in 43 states. We want you to talk to us about that today.
Thank you so much, and I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you, because you stay focused on the issues and you're very committed to making sure that people in your listening audience know what's going on. I'm just grateful to share the little that I know. I want to make one correction.
Mm-hmm.
I'm no longer the principal coordinator of the Bridge Crossing Jubilee. I am the president of the association, but this year I had another young man by the name of Drew Glover that took on that responsibility. I'm the founder of the Jubilee, but after 28 years of service, I felt it was time to pass the mantle. Now, get back to the major issue before you. I am so glad you are right on point. First, I want to thank the voters in those 5 key states that went out to vote in record numbers, not only to elect a president that is more sensitive and compassionate and more in line with the ideals of democracy, but also to elect 2 senators from Georgia. And without those 2 senators, the Republicans would have a majority, and absolutely nothing would be done in terms of voting rights, human rights, and police reform. In fact, just last week, we honored the 2 senators from Georgia who won the election, but it was because of record turnout by black people, brown people, and progressive white people. A record turnout. Many of those people stayed in line 8 and 9 hours to give us that victory. And what the listeners have to recognize that without that dedication, without that vote, you would not be getting $1,400 stimulus. your children will not be getting a $1,400 stimulus. People don't recognize it, but when Biden says this stimulus package will take millions of children out of poverty, many of our people don't recognize at this point what that means. That means every child in your family, 17 and under, will get a check for $1,400. It means that every child, 7 years and under, will get $300 a month for a full year. Children over 7 will get something less, $250 to $270. A family, for example, of 7 or 8 children could possibly get up to $30,000 or $40,000, where they have been barely existing on measly wages or income. And that is all because of the vote. That's why there's such a big push to take away the right to vote, to minimize it, and to do everything possible so that Republicans can return to a majority in the Senate, to return to a majority in the House, so that all of these measures that are going on right now can be taken away. The only thing that I was disappointed about is the $15 minimum wage. That was a part of the stimulus, but because there was a Democrat from West Virginia who was against the $15 minimum wage, and it was stricken. But Bernie Sanders and others have not given up on this mission to finally make sure that every working person has a livable wage. So what is the assault on voting about? It's about denying basic human rights and civil rights to American citizens and to immigrants. That's what this fight is about. That's why in 40-some states, there are laws being passed as we speak to not just minimize the right to vote, but to actually discourage our people from voting and to deny them from voting. One of the most repressive laws that Georgia is trying to pass, they may have passed it, I'm a little behind on that, but I know that we're trying to pass it, and I think they were trying to pass it, they may have passed it. And this is this, that they have a law that says a person in line for 7, 8 hours, if you bring them water, if they are having a sunstroke, if they are having any type of health problems because of standing in line to vote for hours, if you bring them water, that is a criminal act where you can be arrested. Now, all you have to do is pretend you're in Saudi Arabia or North China, North Korea. And if someone came and said that the government was trying to pass such a law, you would not believe you were in America. And then again, you would believe you were in America if you knew American history. Because as far back as a Reconstruction period, every effort has been made by the so-called losers of the war, but we know they didn't lose. The South did not win the Civil War. Their ancestors are still in the legislature. Their ancestors are still in Congress, in state legislatures, to make sure that Justice Taney's decision is still the law. And that decision was black people have no rights that white people are bound to respect. Primarily white men are bound to respect. So we understand that that law has not been repealed. If we look back at history and see what happened in Wilmington, North Carolina, when black men were the majority office holders in the city and county of Wilmington, North Carolina, what happened? The same thing happened in Wilmington that happened on January the 6th in America. Stormed the White House, stormed the Capitol with weaponry, bear gas, determined to take back the votes of black people and to put Trump in office. They used violence. An officer was killed, 2 committed suicide, hundreds were wounded, and yet that is not a new phenomenon. It has happened on the state level in places like Wilmington, North Carolina, where office holders were lynched and killed and driven out of office and out of town. Same thing happened in Louisiana. Throughout our history, these violent acts, these coups to remove legitimately Democratic elected officials from office is not new to America. As a matter of fact, it's not restricted to America. All the talk about Iran. Let's go back in history. In 1953, grandson of Roosevelt, working for the CIA, went into Iran and orchestrated through the most violent means, paid gang leaders to fight each other, paid gang leaders to go to the home of the prime minister and to kill him and to take over the government. Thousands of people were killed at the direction of the American government. So what happened after that? The prime minister was replaced by a dictator who stayed in office 25 years with the Corporation of America, all because they wanted the oil. England wanted the oil that was in Iran. I give those examples to emphasize to the public, those who do not learn the lessons from history are bound to repeat them. So what happened on January 6th was just a repeat of the history of violence. Any means necessary to maintain white supremacy and white power, those tools have been used. So now that we have a president and, thank God, a vice president of African descent and Indian descent, who are determined to restore some semblance of democracy, the Republicans are very clear that the only way we can maintain power is to suppress or oppress the black vote. And that's exactly what they're doing. In spite of the fact that 60 lawsuits, even Republican judges found that there was absolutely no systemic voter fraud, that this election was legitimately won by Mr. Biden. They are still pushing that lie, and so many Republicans believe it, and they are supporting their legislators that are basically doing everything they can to minimize the black vote.
So it's almost like we had so much work to do, and now we started all over again with a lot of work to do. I want to ask you this: is that when we look at some of the bills that have been introduced, basically is bills that have always been out there, like absentee voting and automatic voting, voter registration, disability access. I mean, these are some of the things that the states are introduced bills on, and polling places. We've always had the issue with places where they set up the polling to vote, because sometimes it's very inconvenient for some people. And then you talk about you mentioned about Georgia's suppression effort in Georgia. I heard that it's escalating. It's moving really fast. You wonder why, right? So with that in mind, we maintain that progress? I mean, as voters, and what is the plan to meet this naked voter suppression?
Well, I think the answer to that question again lies in history, and not just ancient history. What happened in Georgia is critical. Instead of being discouraged by the attack on voting rights, and by the way, this escalated after the election of President Obama, the first black president. It escalated when the Supreme Court in the Shelby case coming out of Shelby County, Alabama, actually gutted Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, which gave a free hand for the Southern and the Northern and the Western white supremacists to take away, to minimize the vote, to redistrict and do whatever they could to maintain power. Because nothing they did had to be pre-cleared any longer by the government. So what happened in Georgia? When that happened, it made people stronger. It made people more determined. And I think that every sorority, fraternity, social group, culture group, economic group, we have to make voting a focus of our organization no matter what it is. I'll tell you what I'm doing in Selma. Started a campaign called Restore. Restoring our safety, our excellence, our economy, blah, 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 blah. And I'm saying to people as an attorney, I help a lot of people, but if you are not a registered voter, don't come and see me unless you got a pocket full of money. I had people that come to my office today. They needed help with the stimulus. We've been helping people, a lot of people, especially homeless people and people who basically have no real economic means. They have a right to the stimulus, but they don't know how to get it. They don't know that all they have to do is fill out a 1090 form and proceed. But I'm saying to them, I'm giving you these free services only if you bring me a voter registration card. I think that what we have to do, I don't care if the person is homeless, have a mental problem, need to have a light bill paid. I have people coming to me all the time, have to pay their light bill. No, you will get no help from me unless you are a registered voter. I think we're going to have to make that an essential requirement of the assistance that we give people. Because no matter how poor people are in terms of their economics, well, you don't have to have poverty of spirit. We're going to have to lift the spirits of our people. We're going to have to encourage them to lift their spirits and to claim their rights in this country, claim their right to reparation, claim their right to dignity, claim their right to equal treatment under the law, claim their right to be treated fairly when stopped by the police. We have the power to make these claims if we act collectively. In Alabama, what they're doing in Georgia is already the law in Alabama. We don't have early voting in Alabama. Already in Alabama, you cannot vote absentee unless you have clear reasons. No one can bring your absentee ballot to the courthouse. You have to bring it or mail it. All of the things that Georgia is trying to do is already the bad law in Alabama. So to answer your question, it is really in our hands. I don't know about you, but I came from a family when things got tough, we got tougher.
Yes.
Ex-mother used to say, don't worry, children. When things get bad, that's when I'm at my best. When things get bad in the black community, historically, we have been at our best. That's what Georgia exemplified a few weeks ago, and that's what we have to do moving forward. As we use the legal tools, I thank God for the Legal Defense Fund and the extraordinary leader of the Legal Defense Fund. They are fighting hard. Our civil rights organization, NAACP, SCLC, Al Sharpton, Jesse Jackson, one thing we have to stop doing is stop nullifying our leaders. You know, nobody's perfect. There are no perfect leaders. There are no perfect followers. But we have to coalesce with people like the Asians who are now under attack. Now they know how it feels. They're under attack. They are being targeted because of the outrageous statements of Trump. But all people who are victims of a system of oppression and racism, we got to find a way to work together and to magnify our voices and to magnify our votes.
I'm going back to the church again because so many of us watch on PBS the history of of the black church, and now I'm asking the question: what do you think the responsibility of the black church, especially during this always, but especially during this time now? I see 43 states introducing bill, and if they pass, that would be law, and then that would come right back to Congress again. So what can black churches do?
They need to read the scripture and do what the scripture says. It's that simple. There are many passages of the scripture, and I'm not a biblical scholar, but the one that stands out most is when Jesus said, that which you do for the least of these, you do for me. Mm-hmm. You know, if you haven't been to the prisons to check on the prisoners to make sure they're being treated fairly, then you haven't done the work of Jesus. If you have not checked on your children in school to make sure they're not being miseducated, then you're not doing the work of Jesus. If you're not lifting the poor and doing everything you can to bring children out of poverty, which this bill allegedly does for millions of children, if you're not about that work, and how does that work get done? Well, you don't have to go on the street with a ticket sign, but the least you can do is to vote, and to vote for people who are right, not just because they're white, or not even just because they're black, but because they're right, because they're about what that scripture talks about when Jesus talks about what you do for the least of these, you do for me. And we have to stop, again, quoting the scripture, we have to teach from the pulpit that the people are suffering from a lack of knowledge who they are, a lack of knowledge of what America has done to become the most powerful country in the world. What sins did this country commit when they stole the land of the Native American, stole the labor of the black man, and installed a government with 12 white men, presidents, who own people of color, who were free to rape our children? That's a part of American history that they don't want anyone to know. We need to know that knowledge, know this information, not to hate, but to live. And to lift our children from this false notion that they're inferior. To lift our children from the notion that the only thing they can be good at is playing sports and playing music. That they can be great scientists, great philosophers. The ministers, the churches, have always played a role in lifting our people out of injustice and lifting them closer to the promised land. And they have to do that even more so now. And it takes what one of the old singers said, wake up everybody, it's time to teach and preach a new way.
Yes.
It's time for that.
Some politicians are having a fit about aid to black farmers. What is your opinion of that?
It shows how racism is so prevalent. Here are these white men, what's his name, Lindsey Graham, said this is reparation. And it's not enough to be reparation. They owe us a lot more than these farmers going to get from that little deal.
That's true.
What I thought of was this, the Homestead Act. This government gave millions of acres of land to white settlers going west. Millions. These were immigrants. Many of them weren't even American citizens. Now, this was after the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment was passed about freeing people, black people from slavery and giving them the right to vote, da-da-da-da-da. Here come immigrants from this country. They claim they're so anti-immigrant, but if they were white immigrants from Europe, they got millions of acres of land, and no one said a mumbling word. So for the Republicans to attack this measly little handout, what they call a handout to black farmers, when most of our black farmers have already lost their land. 50 years after slavery, I don't know how they did it, because some of the members of my family did it. Mm-hmm. How in the world did they manage to get 15 million acres of land in spite of the broken promise of 40 acres in a mule? How did our people, what ingenuity, what creativity, what resilience? When I did the study on black land laws for farmers' homes back in 1980, we were down to less than 4 million acres of land. So this bill is only directed at those who still have land. What about all the people who lost their land? In the Black Farmers lawsuit, I was fortunate enough to represent new communities. 5,000 acres were taken by the U.S. government, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, foreclosed on land that they had no right to foreclose, causing this group of black farmers to lose 5,000 acres of land. So what they get a $13 million settlement. That is nothing. What if they were able to continue to grow their farm in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s? It would be worth a lot more than that $13 million I got them. So the point is, those are just pure hypocrites who are attacking what black farmers are getting. And what we should be saying, that is not nearly enough. Give back the land that you took from the Native Americans. Give back the land that you took from black people through trickery and tax sales and adverse possession. Then come and talk to me. But right now, keep your mouth shut, because you are a beneficiary of the suffering of black people, black farmers, and now you got the nerve to cry about it.
There's some. There are actually some black farmers who lost their life. They died. They died before they got a couple of dollars from the government. They literally died from stress and other illnesses that brought on this whole situation. So you are so right that that's not money. That's just only a chump change for black farmers.
It reminded me of a farmer in Georgia. I still see the picture in my mind. The widow of a black farmer in a broken down trailer. Her husband had died from a heart attack after they took his land. And she was left with nothing but a broken down trailer. Every time I see that picture in my mind, it brings me such grief, because that is one of a million pictures. Lives destroyed by a government that has never cared nothing about black people, brown people. And for the first time in a long time, we now have a government that appears to be sympathetic and compassionate, but they will not stay in power or use that power to bring about an end to police brutality. They will not be around to make sure that we have universal health care. They will not be around to make sure that the police is not only reformed but reimagined. They will not be around if we don't register and vote, no matter what stumbling blocks they put in our way, no matter how many people they arrest, no matter how many people they kill, no matter how many people they lie on. We have to fight even harder. We have to have the courage and the tenacity of a Harriet Tubman. With a bounty on her head, she kept going back over and over again. We have to have the courage of a Fannie Lou Hamer years later who stood up against the white aristocracy. We have to have the courage of the people in Selma who risked their lives in crossing that bridge to demand the right to vote. who are beating down not just John Lewis, but Amelia Boynton, Linda Lowry, Marie Foster, women and men who will never be known in a history book. They did this so that lives can be better for people that will never know their names. And we owe that same responsibility to the next generation. We've been given a pass. We have been given a slight reprieve. 4 years of not unprecedented, because what Trump did was precedented. I want people to know that we've had presidents as bad as he was. It was under President Eisenhower where CIA went into Iran and literally took out and killed thousands of people. Just because they weren't Americans, let's not minimize what they did. It was in places like Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama where white gangs were given a license to lynch and kill with impunity. History is just repeating itself, and until we do as Tony Browder, my brother in your area, Asa, and all these African scholars keep begging us, because when we know who we are and whose we are, we will kill the myth of white supremacy. You see, white supremacy cannot exist in the minds of white people alone. If it is not in the minds of black people, it will cease to exist. As long as we believe we're inferior, as long as we believe that we cannot be the astronauts, that we cannot be the president, that we cannot be the scientists, as long as we deny the fact that we can be as great in the classroom, we can be as great in the business boardroom as we are on that basketball court. When we recognize that genius in ourselves and our children, the myth of white supremacy will be killed forever. And you don't have to worry about the black vote. We will vote in our own interest. And what we will do, unlike any other race, and I don't believe this, I think we're the only race, and I might be criticized for this, that has compassion for all races. Now, that doesn't mean all of us feel this way. I'm going to give you an example. I was giving out coats.
You have a couple more minutes. Okay. No, we don't even have 1 minute. I got half a minute.
Okay. I'm sorry. I got carried away.
No, that's okay. No, I thought, complete your sentence, yes.
I was trying to make the point that we have compassion. I saw this white lady, homeless, walking the streets without a coat. My first instinct was, why should I give her a coat? She's a Trump supporter. She supports the attack on our democracy and the black people. But then I said, no. She's also a victim of this vicious system, because she has been taught that in spite of being homeless and poor, that she's better than a black rich man. So I turned around and gave her that coat. My point is, we are more compassionate people. And we have to use that compassion in our race. Because sometimes we're more compassionate to people outside of our race. Sometimes we're more compassionate to the people who oppress us. That's why when the people were killed in South Carolina, those 9 people killed in church, they went to the judge and said, have compassion for this young white man who killed our preacher. We have to show that same kind of compassion for our people and our children.
And show compassion, but also be very knowledgeable of what's going on. And you are knowledgeable.
Knowledge is the key.
Right, and then knowledge is the key.
Compassion without knowledge is useless.
Yes, and I agree with you. Yes, be loved, but also, the lack of knowledge can really get you in a serious situation. I don't know how to thank you. I think about you often, about what keep you going, what keep you fighting. You've been fighting for a long time. You still fighting. You get more energy every time I talk to you. But I know God is providing that strength that you need to educate us. And I want to, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. There is none like you.
Thank you so much for what you do.
And you bring it to us, and we thank you so much. To our listeners, we thank you for just being with us, and continue to learn, continue to work with your community, continue to spread the news in your churches. As church leaders are listening, it's our responsibility to educate our people and continue to pray. You cannot stop praying. May God bless you. You've been listening to Sunday Evening with Reverend Sue.
Simply 'cause our hair is long. Oh, you know we've got to find a way. Bring some understanding here today. Oh.
sight. Don't punish me with brutality. Come on, talk to me. You can see what's going on.